Hello, everyone. Hope the mic's working this time. Right, I'm going to try and actually pick up comments during this. I think I've finally learnt my lesson. Anyway, hopefully it will be working. And as I say, I'm going to keep checking my phone in case anyone's desperately trying to get hold of me to tell me nothing's working here. So obviously the debacle of last night, but one of the reasons I wanted to do a repeat today was because there was some quite good questions and I thought there were some interesting points to cover. A few of them I think were quite interesting because a few of them all tied into the same kind of thing. And I think it's probably useful. What I normally do obviously is just work my way through the questions, but I thought it might be better this time to talk about a few issues, few key concepts first, because as I say, there's quite a few comments here that all kind of tie back to the same general bits and pieces. So the first thing I want to talk about is cravings. Okay. There's been quite a few posts in the group, and it's just sort of it's a general idea that cravings are almost like this external thing that you can't control, like a meteorite flying out of outer space and just smacking you. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just one of those things that happens. And I think the fact of the matter is you need to bear in mind that cravings are an actual thought process. They're a conscious thought process that you go through. So when you're thinking about things, so say you're just walking around or something, you'll be thinking about things, and your brain will sort of work through and start thinking about different things. And if you just kind of leave it, it will just jump from subject to subject and just keep turning things over. Okay. If it starts to alight on drinking and the subject of drinking, it can go one of two ways. So thinking about alcohol is not craving it. Okay, fantasizing about alcohol is craving it. I think about alcohol loads and loads, but I never fantasize about it. And that's how a craving starts. So the craving starts when you start thinking about alcohol and you start fantasizing about it. So you start thinking that, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have a drink in this situation? Or you walk past a pub or a bar or the wine aisle, or you see people drinking, or none of those things. You just happen to start thinking about Christmas, and that you won't be drinking at Christmas, and you start to then worry about it and think about it. So that's the first part of craving. It's basically fantasizing about it. And that's one of the key concepts I want people to bear in mind, is that it is a fantasy. We always build it up to be much, much more than it is. And this is why I always say that it's the idea and not the reality of drinking that pulls us in. Because, for example, if we have an argument with our partner and we're upset, or we have a bad day at work, or we're miserable for whatever reason, we always sort of have this idea that we'll pour a drink and all our worries will miraculously disappear and we'll sit there as happy as anything. Of course, it doesn't work that way at all. You feel just as miserable when you've had the drink. In fact, for most of us who are committed to not drinking, we feel even worse, because not only do we have the original problem, we've also got the guilt and worry because we've given in and we're drinking again. Okay, so that's the first stage of the craving. So the first stage of the craving is when you start fantasizing about how nice it will be to have a drink. The second phase is when it gets really bad, and that's when you actually entertain the possibility of having a drink. Okay, so you can quit drinking and you can be perfectly happy not to drink, and that's good. Or you can quit drinking and you can continue to fantasize about drinking, which isn't particularly ideal. But it's when you start to entertain the possibility of having a drink, that's when it really kicks in and becomes really bad, because you go onto a completely different thought process. Because that's the time when you go into the thought process of shouldn't I or shouldn't I? Should I, shouldn't I? So suddenly you're thinking about, should I have a drink? I really want one. I'll feel rubbish tomorrow. I'm supposed to be quitting, but I just feel miserable. How can I ever enjoy life again with that? And you go through, and it's a very unpleasant internal dialogue. It's almost like having an argument with yourself, and it is not pleasant. Okay. The quickest and easiest way to resolve it is to have a drink. Okay. Because at that point, you're not drinking for the sake of the alcohol. That's become a placebo. What you're actually drinking for is sorry, got my phone now in case anyone messages, and now I'm getting all kinds of things coming in. I might have to put it on silent. So it's a placebo at that point, because where you end up is, so let me give you an example. And the reason I give this, because someone mentions in one of the questions that I will come on to about going on holiday. So let's say, well, in fact, let's take Christmas as an example, because we've got Christmas coming up soon. Okay. So it's a time of year when you should be enjoying yourself. You'll be out with friends. You'll be celebrating. If you go to a Christmas function, or you're there on Christmas Day, and you suddenly think, ooh, a drink would be nice now. Wouldn't it be wonderful? Wouldn't it be absolutely perfect if I had a glass of mulled wine or red wine or champagne or a beer or whatever it is? And then if you then start to think, do you know, I could just have the one, that would be okay, wouldn't it? Suddenly, you're not enjoying Christmas Day. You're not enjoying time with the family. You're not enjoying what you're eating. You're not concentrating on what people are saying, because you're totally taken up in this internal argument with yourself that's really very unpleasant. Okay. And as I've said, the quickest way to get out of that is to take an alcoholic drink. Alan Carr developed his stop smoking method back in the 80s. This is like 40 years ago. And one of his key points, and I don't think he appreciated the mechanics of why it was so important, but it's certainty. Okay. And he always said you have to be absolutely certain you're never going to smoke again. And then a lot of people who get into that mindset then, surprise, surprise, find it ridiculously easy to stop, and find that they didn't crave. And the reason for that is they didn't get into that internal dialogue, because they didn't get to the point of thinking, should I or shouldn't I? They're so definitely not going to smoke. They don't crave the cigarette because they never get into that thought process. Okay, so that is the key thing I want you to bear in mind with drinking, or in fact craving anything. It starts as fantasizing about it, and then if you move into the should I or shouldn't I, you're completely taken up with this unpleasant internal conflict. And the quickest and easiest way to resolve it is to have a drink, because when you've had the drink, there's no point thinking should I or shouldn't I. You're not arguing yourself about whether to have it, because you're done. You've had it. The floodgates are open. That's the end. So that's what I wanted to say there. The other thing I just wanted to say is, and this is a concept I sort of built in Alcohol Explained too, and it's about dealing with, I think I've called it in the book, like your idyllic drinking situations. So Christmas holidays, birthdays, family barbecues, concerts, whatever it is to take a three-prong approach to these situations. Right, because in the same way we idolize drinking, we also idolize these drinking situations. So to go back to Christmas again, we idolize the drinking part of Christmas. So you might be sat here now thinking, oh yeah, Christmas coming up. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely to sit there and have a nice glass of mulled wine or champagne and laugh with friends? And you've got, you know, it's nice and warm in the house. It's cold outside and you're having a glass of mulled wine or red wine or whatever. But actually, that's rubbish. That is not the reality of Christmas. Nobody experiences that side of Christmas. Okay, the reality of Christmas is firstly waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning on Christmas morning, feeling exhausted but unable to sleep and riddled with anxiety, because that's a physiological effect of drinking, dragging yourself out of bed, feeling tired and probably hungover all day, slowly managing to drink your way through the hangover, just about starting to feel normal again when you eat, and then that makes you feel absolutely exhausted and probably fall asleep on the sofa, and then wake up feeling even more wretched later on to try and drink through it. And that's best case. That's not to factor in all the potential arguments and bickering that you get when you're cooped up with your family for too long and drinking. Okay, so the three-pronged approach is, firstly, make sure you see the reality of it. Okay, right, just checking the comments here. Okay, good. And actually, I found a way to check comments. Excellent. Right, so the second thing, so the first pronged approach when you have these situations is to recognize that what you're actually fantasizing about is complete nonsense anyway. The second thing you do is look for the pleasure in the situation that is there regardless of alcohol. Okay, so for Christmas, you don't have to work for the day. You probably get presents. They're probably rubbish, but at least you get something. You get to eat some nice food, sit around and do not much of anything and watch a load of TV. So it's a good day. Holidays the same. You're away, you can relax, you can sit around, you can read. There's a lot of pleasure in these situations that's not reliant on the alcohol. Okay. The third prong, the third part of the approach, is to recognize how actually alcohol detracts from the pleasure. Okay, so like I've said, the pleasure in Christmas is sitting around relaxing, having some time with the family. And actually, if you're hungover and drinking, you're not probably going to get that pleasure. Same as being on holiday, you kind of have this fantasy of sitting around by the pool, everything's nice, you're relaxing, you're having a nice cold beer. Most of the time, you're feeling pretty tired and lethargic and hungover anyway. So that's the three-pronged approach. Recognize that the fantasy is false. Look for the pleasure in the situation that is there regardless of alcohol, and then actually start to understand how alcohol is going to detract from that situation. Okay, so having dealt with these two main concepts, the craving and how we deal with these difficult situations, I'm going to plow on with the questions now. The first one is day 40. Too bad this wasn't Lent. I'm still struggling with the idea of the long haul. How do I go from 40 days to 20 years alcohol free? It's a daunting proposition. By the way, these 40 days haven't been a major struggle because I made a decision to make not drinking the priority of my life. I've committed to them. This group and other private groups have kept me accountable. I love the live streams. Okay, well, when there's sound, not quite so fun when they're silent. But anyway, yeah, so let's go back to what I was talking about before. One of the reasons contemplating the whole rest of your life without drinking is such a daunting prospect is because we can't bear the thought, how are we going to get through Christmas and holidays and all these wonderful experiences that we have and only enjoy because we're drinking? Okay, so that's where you bring in this three-pronged approach and realize that it's total nonsense. It's just fantasy. It's ridiculous. Make not drinking the priority of your life. It should be the priority of your life, but I think where you really want to get to is it's a natural part of your life. So as I say, I spend a lot of time thinking about alcohol. I spend zero time fantasizing about it because I'm nearly 7 years down the line now, and I'm so practiced at dispelling the myths. As soon as they jump into my head, I hardly get them anymore now anyway. And so I think that's where you really need to get to. So I spend zero time fantasizing about alcohol, and I spend zero time contemplating whether to take a drink. And that's where the craving really kicks in. So that's what I would work towards. It sounds like if you're getting on well with alcohol-free life generally, and it's the thought of the rest of your life, start thinking, what part of my life would I not want to feel slightly dulled and then anxious? What part of my life is incomplete without a foul-tasting poison that just makes me feel slightly disorientated and then quite anxious afterwards, and then ruins my sleep? Start getting to the reality of it, and as I say, start taking that three-pronged approach, which might be useful. Someone's put here, I've been meaning to ask the group about sleep. Has hours increased? For me, it was 6 unrestful, but now it's restful. Was hoping to get 7 or 8 hours by now, 6 months alcohol-free sober, but this hasn't happened. So what I would say is, with sleep, if you are getting enough sleep, you won't be tired during the day, and so don't worry about it. So I was a binge drinker mainly, and I would sleep at least 8 hours a night. Unless I was drinking, then it was about 5 or so, and then I'd wake up and be unable to get back to sleep. But so after having quit, so I would even like a week after not drinking, I'd still be getting 8 hours. And what I realised now is I think my body was trying to catch up from the missed sleep from when I was in one of my binges. And now I generally average out at about 5 or 6 hours sleep a night, and I kind of wake up at like 4 or 5 in the morning thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be knackered today. And actually I'm not. And I think I just don't need as much sleep. So what I would say is, don't worry about what hours of sleep you're getting. If you're not tired during the day, you're getting enough sleep, and it's the right quality of sleep. So don't worry too much about it. Someone's put, I'm a bit over 9 months and trying to differentiate if it's that I've simply more energy and just don't require the standard amount or excess amount of non-quality sleep I was programmed while drinking. Perhaps add this universal stress with COVID news, confusion and uncertainty, or perhaps normal. almost feel as if it's a hormone or brain adjustment. Yeah, because don't forget, when you sleep, you don't get when you drink, you don't get proper quality sleep. It's completely outside of our normal sleeping pattern, so it's almost like missing a night's sleep. So if you're drinking every day or regularly, you're constantly tired, and then even if you take a day off, your body's going to be desperately trying to catch up. So when you stop for a bit, you'll catch up and get back to normal, and you might find you need just a lot less sleep, and that's pretty much what I've found. So here's another one. How can I push towards 100% commitment when I still get thoughts like, what's the point at my age 69 and I'm not that bad, when in reality I'm heading on a new adventure, returning to the UK from Spain, and will be able to be a proper grandmother, COVID permitting. And I hate myself every time I give in. I could probably answer these myself by rereading your books, but maybe someone else may feel the same and your answer would help them. Thank you for all you do. So again, I would sort of turn it around a bit and say, okay, so for me, if I found out I had a terminal disease and I was going to die in a month, I still wouldn't drink, because I wouldn't want my last week or my last month on earth to be spent feeling either slightly dulled and disorientated, or lethargic or anxious. Age is irrelevant. The question is, are you getting the best out of life? And if you think that taking a drug that makes you feel dulled and then correspondingly anxious, so that it feels nice when you relieve that anxiety by another dose of the drug, you maybe need to rethink how you're seeing things with regard to being a grandmother as well. So I always say this, but as far as I'm concerned, dealing with young children, you need two things. Okay, you need patience and you need energy. Okay, alcohol robs you of both of those. And I really can't understand people that say, how can I, they wine o'clock and getting the kids into bed and having a glass of wine, and it's the only way I can do parenting. And I think it's beyond me, because these people just don't appreciate how much it affects you. If you want to be the best parent or grandparent or whatever it is, you can't be tired and you can't be robbed of energy, which is what alcohol does to you. But again, try and think about what you're actually getting out of it. And again, go back to that three-pronged approach, because it doesn't just work with your kind of idyllic drinking situations. It works on a day-to-day basis. So just think about coming in from, well, not most people come in from work these days because of lockdown, but imagine, like sitting down of an evening and opening a bottle of wine, and you use that three-pronged approach to that as well. This is a good one. Do you think it's really hard to give up alcohol because of the sugar in it as well? Kind of double whammy. You have the alcohol and the sugar addiction in one. That's a really good point. And I think absolutely it is. And I think that's one of the reasons. So if you are feeling hungover and a bit ropey and you have a beer, it's not just got alcohol in it, it's got a load of sugar in it, or glass of wine or whatever. And that's going to make you feel short-term better as well. So I think it's absolutely the case. But I think it's probably a mix together, but I think you can have the one without the other. So, for example, I think spirits have got less refined sugar in, and they probably still hit you just as hard. But no, that's an excellent point. Hi, William, are you working on any other books? 1 month today, and after Alcohol Explained 1 and 2, I'm moving on to Diet and Fitness Explained. Maybe Wild Raging Emotions and Recovery Explained, laugh out loud. Yeah, that's great, and I hope you enjoy Diet and Fitness Explained. Yes, I am working on another book, but it's all under wraps at the moment because I'm not quite sure where it's going to go and what's going to happen with it. So here we go. Hi, William. Really appreciate these Q&As. Can you talk more about how you dealt with cravings, please? So again, remember, cravings aren't things that just hit you out of the blue. It's a thought process, and you control your thoughts. Okay, so when you start thinking about alcohol, wouldn't it be nice to have a drink in X, Y, or Z situation? Stop and think about the reality. Would it? Is life going to be perfect? Is it going to be that perfect situation when you're sat there drinking a carcinogenic, foul-tasting poison that makes you feel slightly dulled? Probably not. So what I'm trying to do here, I'm not trying to sell something. I'm just trying to break through the nonsense and the hype that surrounds alcohol. If you're drinking, this is a really powerful thing to do. And I think someone posted in the group about it the other day. I think he stopped for a bit and he decided I think from memory, he was on a work do or something, and I think he ordered some drinks to his room. So that's a great way of doing it. Have it on your own in the room and really concentrate on it. And he was saying it wasn't that pleasant. And that can be a really powerful thing. And I say this again and again, sit with the normal amount of drink you drink in an evening, no TV, no radio, no company, no nothing, and just sit and drink it. And ideally have a 5 or 6 day break from alcohol before you do it. Because don't forget, if you're drinking daily, that first glass of wine or beer or spirit or whatever you have, it's a wonderful feeling. It makes you feel great. It makes you feel relaxed and content and happy because it's anesthetizing all the anxiety that it caused by the previous drinks. And that wonderful feeling you get is how I and everyone else who doesn't drink feels all the time. And yes, we have bad days, horrible days, and things go nasty and wrong, but that's your starting point. You're usually feeling quite content and happy. So just factor that in if you do that. This is another question I really like because someone has put planning a relapse. I seem to be doing this. Maybe advice how to change the thinking around this. This is a really good point, and it's firstly, thank you for your honesty because most people wouldn't admit to this. Giving in when you're drinking and you give in and give up giving up and start drinking again, a lot of the times something bad happens, you have a bad day, or you just can't be bothered to keep working at it, or whatever it is, and you give in and you have a drink there and then. It doesn't always work like that. Sometimes people will give up, but they will plan when they're going to relapse. A kind of a classic one is a business trip. So if you give up and your family, it's got quite bad with your drinking and you're going to lose your partner or your home or whatever, or your job or whatever, you can then think, oh, business trip, I'm away, no one to see me, I can lock myself in my room and drink. So people will plan relapses, or, the family's away for the weekend or whatever it might be. People don't talk about it much because when people are planning a relapse, they often don't reach out for help because it's a much more deliberate thought process. They are going to drink, they're sick of sobriety, whatever it is, and they plan it all out. It's a very interesting concept. The advice is all the same, though. Think about what you think you're getting out of that alcohol, what it's doing for you. Is it really going to do that, or is it not? Is it going to make things worse? Is it going to make you feel better? Really drill down to the reality of it. Also, if it is something like a business trip, I'd love to have a bit more information about how you're planning this relapse, whether you're just going to have a drink at the weekend or whether it is, you're getting away from the family or something and thinking you're going to do this. Because I think it's a really interesting concept to be talking about. But I would try that three-pronged approach. Firstly, you want to be thinking about why you still want to drink and what it's got that you think you're going to get out of it. And do that three-pronged approach. Is it going to give me that? Am I going to be happy sat there with that drink? How am I going to feel before, during, and after? Particularly after and during. Are you going to be happy while you're sat there drinking, or probably not? So I hope that's useful. I'd really like to have some more information about that because I think it's an important topic. I would be interested in exploring the topic around believing that there is no possible benefits to alcohol at all. I've been giving up alcohol for 20 years on and off, and although I know the cons outweigh the benefits of alcohol, I still believe that I like getting out of it. I enjoy music more. I like being in that zone where the atmosphere changes. I'm sure it's partly habit built up over my adult life, but I do miss it. Also, the extreme highs and lows that binge drinking mixed with socializing brings, contrasting with sobriety and staying in a lot. This is a great comment because there's so many things to talk about at all. So no possible benefits to alcohol. I know the cons outweigh the benefits, and I still believe that I like getting out of it. Okay, so getting out of it with alcohol is just being intoxicated. It's not really being there, not really appreciating what is going on. I enjoy music more, and I like being in the zone where the atmosphere changes. So music is enjoyable. I enjoy music. And taking a drug that dulls your senses isn't going to increase that enjoyment. Okay, what it can do, and remember the craving, if you're used to drinking when you're listening to music and you put some music on and you sit there and think, I can't really enjoy this without a drink. Should I have a drink? Shouldn't I? What if this, that? You're not listening to the music. You're not relaxing and enjoying the music. You're involved in an unpleasant internal dialogue about whether you should drink or not. Okay, so when you do finally have that drink, that dialogue ends and you can concentrate on the music. And that's how it works. It's a placebo effect, totally. Okay, having a mild sedative can't make you enjoy music more. Okay, it really is that simple. But obsessing about it, so you're not concentrating on the music and then allowing yourself to listen to the music and actually relax into it, that can absolutely happen. The other thing I like here, so the extreme highs and lows that binge drinking mixed with socializing brings, contrasting with sobriety and staying in a lot. So that suggests to me that you quite like socializing, but you're staying in a lot because going out is not as much fun when you're not drinking. Okay, so extreme highs. So that's an interesting one because, as I say, alcohol is a sedative. It cannot give you a high. Okay, but what it can do, there are things called endorphins that your brain releases that makes you feel really good. Okay, you get them when you have sex, when you exercise, when you eat a healthy meal, if you are hungry to begin with. And humans actually also get them when they're socializing, right? Which is quite interesting. We are actually social animals. We're supposed to socialize, and we get an endorphin rush when we socialize. But we're also creatures of society, okay? And to a degree, when we meet new people, we feel slightly nervous and anxious. Okay, we're worried about what they'll think of us if we say something stupid, lots of things. But the usual dynamic in a social situation is you go out, you meet new people, you're slightly nervous, slightly wary, and then you start to relax. And when you relax, you get the endorphin buzz, okay? Because you get the endorphins when you are relaxed and socializing. You don't get them if you're uptight and socializing. So that's the normal dynamic. When you drink alcohol, alcohol is a sedative, so it will anesthetize or sedate those feelings of anxiety that everybody gets when they first socialize. Okay, no matter whether you're really introverted or really extroverted, everyone has a short or long period where it takes them a while to settle into a social occasion. Okay, if you drink alcohol, it will anesthetize the nervousness, so you then start to feel more relaxed, so that then it allows the endorphins to flow. Okay, that's what you're talking about when you say the highs of drinking mixed with socializing. Okay, it's not an alcohol buzz at all, it's an endorphin buzz. Okay, and the reason we tie it into alcohol is because often alcohol will be the thing that sedates the nerves, that allows the endorphins to flow. And of course, there's a counter to that, because if you then go out and don't drink, you say you're a designated driver, you're on antibiotics, or you're doing something the next day, and for whatever reason you decide not to drink, you go out there and you kind of feel, I'm not going to enjoy this because I'm not drinking, and you kind of see it like it's a drag and a bind, and you can't really be bothered with it. And also, let's be honest, a lot of these social occasions are centered around drinking. And if you're not drinking and drinking is important to you, you feel excluded because they're all doing something and you're not. Okay. You're not going to feel like you're not going to get your endorphin buzz if you feel excluded. Okay. Because that's the antithesis of socializing, being excluded. So you go out and you don't drink and you don't get that endorphin buzz. And then the next time you go, you drink and you relax and you do get it. So it kind of feeds into this myth that that's an alcohol buzz, because when you go out and drink, you get that wonderful feeling. And if you go out and you don't drink, you don't get it. But the fact is, it's not an alcohol high at all. There's no such thing as an alcohol high. So that's another thing to bear in mind. I do cover this off, I think, in Alcoholics. I think the original book this is in, but that's a very important point there, with the socializing. And what I would say is, as well, I think it's just under 8 billion people on the planet. Okay, approximately half of them don't drink alcohol. Okay, it's either not available, or it's religious reasons or cultural reasons, or for whatever reason they don't drink alcohol. 4 billion people on the planet don't drink alcohol. Okay, they still go out and enjoy social occasions. They dance, they sing, they laugh, they go to weddings, they go on holiday, and they enjoy their life. Okay, you've got to get away from this belief that you need alcohol to enjoy your life, because 4 billion people live perfectly happy lives without it. The other thing, think of children. When you go out Watch children. Okay, when you go to a children's party, the children turn up, they're shy, they hide behind you. 10-15 minutes later, they're going absolutely berserk. Okay, that's the dynamic. The endorphins start to flow and off they go. Just checking everything's okay on, on the comments. I'm doing this constantly now. When I have drunk for many days and feel awful, it's so easy to stop, and I always feel better from day 2 onwards. Then around day 14, I miss booze. It feels a bit more like Groundhog Day, where everything is the same. I get bored and ultimately end up drinking again. If I could do it for just one night, which I tell myself, then that wouldn't be so bad to drink once every 2 weeks. But the problem is, once I break the cycle, then I get into a cycle of drinking every day again until it gets so bad and I stop again. I'd like to ask William Porter, how do you stay alcohol-free long-term and motivated to do so? Okay, I think I've covered that off anyway. But what I would say, because I think there was, because the next question is similar. My problem is that after an alcohol-free day, I feel good, almost euphoric, and crave a drink, thinking it will extenuate the feeling. I know from past experience it won't, but I can't get over it. So both of those questions, I think I've dealt already with how you should be dealing with that, but also I want to just talk about 2 other concepts. One is fading effect bias and the other is ambition. Okay, so fading effect bias, in fact, there's 3 concepts I need to talk about. The other one's the actual alcohol withdrawal. Fading effect bias, anyone who's read the book will be familiar with this, but it's basically how you look back on past events more positively than when they actually happened. Okay, ambition, I think I dealt with in Alcohol Explained too. I'm not using it in its narrow career sense. I'm using it just in the sense that living creatures are always driven to try and improve their lot in life. Okay, and for humans, that breaks down into 2 separate elements. We tend to be very critical of what we have, and we tend to fantasize about what we don't have. And that's the kind of carrot and stick that drives us on to keep striving for better and better. We look at the next house or the next job or whatever it is and think, oh my God, that'll be perfect. And we look at our own job and our own house and think this is awful. And that's what drives us on. And it's a good thing. It keeps people pushing forward and looking to improve their lives. But with addiction, it works against us, because apply it to drinking. You're drinking, you hate it, it's miserable, you really want to stop. And then you stop and you start thinking about drinking and how wonderful it is. And oh, why can't I have a drink? And isn't it perfect? And you become very critical of sober life. It's dull, it's boring, I can't enjoy myself, which is one of the reasons the addicts, not just alcohol, but any addict, tend to just constantly flip from the drug to not taking it and back again. It's to do with the effects of ambition, because what you have, you're critical of, and you want what you haven't got. The other thing, don't forget, with alcohol is, as it wears off, it leaves a corresponding feeling of anxiety, which makes you feel sort of scared and anxious, and everything looks a bit scary. So when you're coming out of a binge, everything looks unpleasant. You look at your drinking and think, oh my God, this is awful, I want nothing more to do with it. After a few days, your brain gets back onto a normal chemical balance, and you go back to being your usual resilient, happy, generally happy self. And you look at your drinking and think, what's the problem? Because you feel confident enough to deal with it. So you drink again and you go back. So for all of these reasons, we come out of a binge, we hate drinking, we want nothing more to do with it. It terrifies us. We're done with it. But within a few days, we're feeling fine and we're happy to go back into it. So that's the explanation. But the answer is going back to what I was talking about before. Remember the whole craving thing, how cravings work, and remember that 3-pronged approach, because you don't just use it with holidays and Christmas, you use it with your whole life, and it works just as well. So the next question is, I would like to know how you manage on your first alcohol-free holiday at an all-inclusive holiday hotel. I know we can't travel at the moment, but it's something I'm dreading, as I can't see how I could enjoy myself in the evenings without alcohol. Right, so this is where you bring in this 3-pronged approach, right? So I think I've already spoken about it a bit anyway. So the idea of being on holiday is you sit there, it's a lovely place, you're sat there happily drinking. It doesn't work like that at all. If you've been drinking the day before, you've probably been tired a bit and dragging yourself through the whole day anyway. I've talked about it all a bit, but I want to just talk again about certainty, because so going back to the key thing with knowing you're not going to drink is because you cut out a massive part of the craving process because you don't go through that horrible internal dialogue of or shouldn't I, shouldn't I. Okay, so what I would say with holidays in particular, and for a lot of people holidays are one of the big ones, particularly when it's all inclusive and there's free flowing booze 24 hours a day, is go through that normal process of thinking about how enjoyable it will be without drinking anyway. But what I would say is how it normally works is we're used to drinking on holiday, and your first one is going to feel a bit strange and a bit different. Okay, and it will be different. It will be just as enjoyable. It'll probably be a lot more enjoyable, but it will be different and it will be scary because we always kind of expect the worst of things. So what I would say is, and this is how I think you should approach it, you've done holidays drinking. Okay, you've probably done lots of holidays drinking, right? You might think that back on them and think they were wonderful and perfect, but at the end of the day, they weren't wonderful and perfect because of the alcohol. And if that was the only pleasure, why would you spend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grand going on holiday? You could just buy yourself a few crates of whiskey and sit on your own on a sofa and drink for 2 weeks. Okay, if the only pleasure is in the alcohol, why are you going abroad to do it? Okay, it's a pleasant and lovely situation without it. And what I would say is, you've done drinking holidays. Okay, you know what they're like. Now you're going to do a non-drinking holiday. Go on holiday, and you know for a fact you are not going to drink, whether it's the worst, most miserable experience of your entire life. Just be absolutely 100% certain that you are not going to drink for that holiday. Okay, if you know you're not going to drink, no matter what happens, you will cut out half of that craving process immediately because you won't be going through that internal dialogue. That then gives you an opportunity to actually just sit and relax and enjoy the holiday and observe it. When you're in the evening thing, you will, if you're relaxed and enjoying yourself without alcohol, you will get that endorphin buzz. It is different from drinking. Okay, because when you get the endorphin rush and alcohol, it's kind of a confused, muddly type of good feeling. But when you get it when you're not drinking, it's a cleaner, purer, more, it's a bit hard to explain, but it's a different feeling, but it's no worse. Okay, so go on this holiday and just know you're not going to drink for it and just see how it goes. Okay, forget all the hype, see it for what it is. It's a cancerous, carcinogenic poison that people happen to drink as opposed to snort or inject or smoke. Okay, it's a drug. It's a drug that makes you feel slightly dull and unpleasant before giving you a corresponding feeling of anxiety. It's a drug that will ruin your sleep and make you feel tired all day. It'll accelerate your heart rate, which will make moving around more difficult for you. And it will make you eat too much, so you feel uncomfortably full all the time. Just keep that in perspective. But as I say, that my one piece of advice would be just go and know that you're not going to drink alcohol. Tell yourself you are not going to. You may drink on the next holiday, but you're going to try this one holiday and see what it's like, and then you will have your comparison. The next question is how to deal with situations when alcohol is present. I think I've pretty much done that. Yeah, you deal with them. Alcohol is present everywhere. You put on the TV, you open a book, you open social media, there's alcohol. Okay, and that's why I often say to people, if your plan for sobriety is avoiding triggers, you're in trouble because triggers are everywhere. You should be able to see a picture of an alcoholic drink without going into, screaming habdabs about it. And if you can't, then you're in trouble. And I'm sorry, but that is the case, because you're going to see a lot of alcohol in the world. 80 or 90% of the population drink. And because most of them aren't comfortable with it and they try and portray a positive image of it, you get a lot of it on social media. All the time you'll see it. So your sobriety needs to be a lot stronger than not coming across alcohol. How to stop counting days and start living life. I'm 1 year sober, but I still think about drinking every day. Well, again, what are you thinking about drinking? I just think about drinking every day, but I spend zero time fantasizing about it, and I spend zero time contemplating whether to drink or not. If you're still thinking about how lovely a drink would be, then I would suggest you try to enforce a bit of reality into the situation, try and strip away the hype. I've spoken about that a few times, but see it for what it is. It's a particularly it's not a nice drug, to be honest. If I could put 20 drugs in front of you, cocaine, amphetamines, ecstasy, alcohol, line them all up. Okay, and you've never tried a drug before in your life, and you could go through and try every single one of them, and you rated them out of 10 on how good they made you feel, alcohol would be right down the bottom end of the list. The only reason it's so prevalent in our society is because it's so easy to make. You just need a load of fruit that's gone out of date, and there's your alcohol. It's not like methamphetamines where you've got to set up a meth lab and know exactly what you're doing and get hold of these very hard to get hold of products and then end up blowing the thing up anyway because it's such a delicate chemical experiment that you do with it. That's the only reason it's so prevalent. It's easy to make. It's not a particularly good feeling. Okay, we tie it up with social occasions and Christmas and holidays, so it's built up into such a much bigger thing than it is. And a lot of it, we're lucky in a way to be addicted to alcohol, because when you strip away the hype, there's so little left of it. I have a question about two categories of drugs and depressants, and of drugs, depressants and stimulants, and how the brain releases its own opposite to counter the imbalance. It makes perfect sense to me, but there's just one element I can't seem to figure out. I used to take all kinds of drugs back in the day, speed, ecstasy, cocaine, etc., that are all stimulants. Not sure if ecstasy is. And the come down would always be what I would associate with hyperstimulated brain, anxiety, racing heart, worrying about anything and everything. I'm just trying to figure out which piece of the jigsaw I'm missing in the basic understanding on how the brain reacts to bring back homeostasis. As the way which I understand it, it should be opposite, i.e. tired, but in a state of calm, albeit feeling like shit, thank you. So it's a good question. What I would say is, the stimulant depressant thing is probably an oversimplification of what's going on neurologically in your brain. Okay, it's how I think of it, and it's how a lot of people relate to it. But it is more complicated than that. Different drugs will do different things. Okay, they're all slightly different. But what I would say for definite is, when you're saying about anxiety, racing heart, worrying about anything and everything, that comes about by the upset to the chemical balance in your brain that's been caused by the previous dose in the drug. Okay, it doesn't really matter which way your brain has been, that chemical balance has been upset, whether it's by a stimulant or a depressant or whatever else it might be, a mix of all of them. You're interrupting that balance. Okay, so you worry about stuff and everything looks worse. Whatever drug you're taking, okay, it initially makes you feel different, but as your brain tries to incorporate the effects so that it can still work well under the effects of the drug, you end up having to take the drug to feel normal. So you feel anxious and miserable, whether it's a depressant or a stimulant, and then you feel normal when you take the drug. That's how they work. And don't forget as well, with the racing heart, that happens whichever drug you take, because your heart has a basic, it can go too low and that's when you die, but that's an extreme situation. Most of the time your heart won't drop below a certain amount, it will only go up. So if you take a depressant, the depressant won't slow your heart down, because your heart isn't designed to slow down under any circumstances. But when it wears off and you're overstimulated, it will go up. Okay, and with the like amphetamine stimulants that you take, your heart rate goes up immediately, because obviously it's a stimulant. So with the heart, it's all bad news. It's all accelerated whichever way you go. What is your opinion on being completely sober from alcohol but still consuming marijuana? And this ties into another question someone asked about how a lot of people who drink alcohol will then get addicted to sugar or whatever else. You literally limp from one addiction to the other. And that's kind of brought on this ridiculous thing about people having addictive personalities, or even worse, that they've got some underlying issue, childhood trauma, that means they're going to be constantly addicted to something. Okay, it's not to do with, you may have underlying issues and you may need to address them. Okay, but it's not the underlying issue that's the problem, it's how you deal with it. Okay, when you're drinking alcohol, because it's a sedative, it takes the edge off how you feel. Okay, so you end up using it when you've had a bad day or an argument or something unpleasant happens. You end up taking it to make you feel better, and you get into the habit of, when you have something bad happen, you reach for something to consume it to make you feel better, to change how you feel. Okay, and then if you say, I'm going to stop drinking, you stop drinking. But if you haven't got another coping mechanism in place, you just reach for the next thing to consume to make you feel different. that could be cigarettes, coffee, sugar, other drugs, whatever it is. And then if you cut that one out, you reach for the next thing and the next and the next. So the issue isn't an underlying issue that you have, it's your coping mechanism. Everybody has stress in their lives. Everyone has bad days. Okay. The difference between the person who's constantly reaching for drugs is that that's their coping mechanism. They want to consume something to change how they feel. Okay. And so that's one of the things. When you stop drinking, you need to get a new coping mechanism. So exercise, yoga, meditation, reading a book, whatever it is, get it in place before you stop drinking, or soon after as possible, because when you stop drinking, life is hugely better, but it's still life, and life has its ups and downs, and you will have horrible days because everyone does. That is life. And you need your coping mechanism in place before you get there, because what you don't want to do is quit, have a bad day, and then, oh, what do I do now? You need that plan in place. And so that's what I would say about being sober from alcohol but still consuming marijuana. If you're using it as a coping mechanism, I don't know that you're living the best life you can do. Are you better off smoking and being stoned all the time than being drunk all the time? Probably, I would say so. But is it as good as doing neither and just taking life on life's terms and feeling happy and resilient and fully present? Possibly not. So I would have a think about that if I was you. You know, but I think certainly is using it as a coping mechanism is not going to end well. I agree with people who say they start feeling really good and the idea of a drink seems harmless. I talk myself out of it, but it's annoying me. It happened to me many times that I gave in, and it was okay for a while until I started to get depressed again and my mindset got negative. So kind of already spoken about this, about that mechanism, how the longer you stop for, sometimes the more you get drawn back into drinking. What I would say is the idea of a drink seems harmless. That's an ominous one, isn't it? Dear me. What you need to remember with alcohol is it's not food. Okay, we kind of liken drugs to food. Oh, I fancy that. So if I've got hankering for a burger tonight, so you have a burger and you've eaten it and you're full, you don't want another burger, or you want a pizza or a curry or whatever it is, you eat it and it satisfies you. Drugs don't satisfy because they create hunger for the next one. Okay, as they wear off, they leave an unpleasant feeling that takes another dose of the drug to relieve that feeling. Okay, it's not like food. You don't take one and feel content and happy and you're done with it. If you can't resist the first one, you're not going to be able to resist the second one, because at the second one, you've got all the reasons why you had to drink the first one, plus you've got the withdrawal. So if you can't resist the first, how on earth are you going to resist the second? That kind of brings me on to how we're doing for time. Ooh, getting a bit short on time here. Ooh, I've got loads of questions left as well. This is I would just, so on that as well, what I would say is saying about one won't hurt brings me on to kind of another topic about moderation, which is how much you want something dictates how much power it has over you. Okay, so if I want a cup of tea, how badly do you want it? You're going to pay £1 for it? Yeah, I'll pay £1 for it. £5, £10, £10. I don't want it that badly. Do you know what I mean? So how badly do you want something? If you don't want it at all, it has no power over you. Okay, if you do want it, it has power over you. And the more you want it, the more power you have. You're going to pay £10, £30, £50. You're going to give up your family, your home, your job for it. How badly do you want that thing? And this is one of the problems with moderation that I never quite understood, is that if you want to drink, it still holds power over you. Okay, if you don't want to drink, if you can genuinely take it or leave it, you wouldn't want to do it in the first place. So that, I think, is hopefully that kind of clarifies that. But that's alarm bells for me. That one drink won't hurt. I would like to. I'm going to have to rattle through the questions a bit quicker now. I'm running a bit low on time. I would like to know if you struggled early on in your sobriety. I agree with most. You start feeling better and you think, well, what, and how it, one won't hurt. Again, have I just done this one? Oh yeah, no, this is a different one, but the same concepts. I know it comes down to truly believing it does nothing for me. I believe that today, but I'm afraid tomorrow I won't. How do you keep yourself protected from relapse? How do you keep the mindset? So that's a good question. So I know it comes down to truly believing it does nothing for me. I believe that today. So today you're fine. So what I would say is don't worry about tomorrow too much. You go out there and enjoy your life. You do need to be on guard, but you don't need to spend as much time not drinking as you spent drinking. You know, you've done the hard work. Now reap the benefits and enjoy the benefits. Go out and enjoy your sober life. You will know when you need to put the work in, because it always starts this way. You will think of a situation and you will think, oh, a drink would be nice in this situation. It might be now you're at a restaurant or a pub or something and you think, oh yeah, it would be nice to have a drink. Or you might be thinking ahead to Christmas or holidays. And that's when you need to stop and go back to the reality and put a bit of work in. But don't just fear itself. Don't just be afraid that one day you'll want to drink again. If you don't want to drink, that's great. I have a tendency to forget the tools and information I've learned from Alcohol Explained until after I choose to drink again and immediately reminded why I can't. Don't forget the dynamic that we fantasize about what we don't have, and we're critical of what we do have. So you'll be fantasizing about how nice it will be to have a drink, and as soon as you have it, the fantasy's gone and you're stuck with the reality. And that's the dynamic there, just to bear in mind. So just how to maintain long-term sobriety. I'm over 40 days in, well done, and my brain is starting to trick me into having rose-tinted glasses regarding my previous drinking. I'm still listening to Alcohol Explained 2, and that is helping. So again, I think we pretty much covered that off with the rose-tinted glasses. Think about the actual situation and just delve into the reality rather than the fantasy of it. Another one here, 6 months alcohol free. I'm afraid of losing a little the attention of keeping focused, even if it's difficult to answer. How long does it take at least to reach a stable, solid stadium of soberness? 1 year, 2 years? What do you think? Is there a main thing to keep in mind to remain safe? The solid stadium of soberness comes from two ways. It either comes from experience or it comes from learning. Okay, so if you're doing it via learning, so teaching yourself that alcohol has absolutely no benefits and all these situations will be more fun without drinking, you shouldn't have to wait for a year or 2 years. It should be immediate. And if it isn't, you keep working on it. If you're doing it by experience, that's not how I did it, so I can't really comment, but I assume you must have to do at least 1 year, because then you've gone through every situation. But I think for most people, they need to go through, for example, holidays a few times to really get to grips with it. I mean, I think in reality, it's a mix of the two. People can learn a bit and then put it into practical effect. But I think really you should be working on it all the time, and you shouldn't be sitting back just expecting things to change over time. I think I'm going to have to call it a day, because I've been going for nearly an hour now, and I think this is probably about where I got to yesterday when I turned the microphone back on. So those last few questions, hopefully I've covered off anyway. So yeah, I think that was it. I think looking back at the other questions, I think these are the ones that I dealt with on the Zoom yesterday. So if you find that, jump ahead the first 40, 50 minutes or whatever while I was talking to myself. I'm just seeing if there's any questions here. So I have at least got a way of now looking at the questions when I'm doing the lives. Okay. Well, sorry about yesterday's debacle again. I hope this was a bit more successful. And I'll be back again probably next Friday. So have a good weekend, everyone, and I will see you soon. Bye.